struggles that big city newspapers have now, that papers the size of the Daily Herald, that while they struggle, there's a lot more level of playing there. There's always a tomorrow there. I'm not sure on the major newspapers now.
We're going to be back with more and a conversation with Marion Wilhoite. We'll take a pause right now.
The thing that always stands out to me about Marion is his historical knowledge of sports in this community. The paper, because we've had so many generations of reporters come and go, and so many different folks work here over the years, to have that kind of institutional knowledge in any of our departments is just gold for the newspaper.
Being an official scorer and a participant in a lot of early leagues in Columbia, how did you get started in that whole process, and how did that relate back to your arithmetic days at McDowell?
Yeah. I've been always around the ball field and stuff, and there was people early on, that adults that were aware of me that I really maybe wasn't aware of them as much, but Crockett Walls was one. Crockett was always around ball fields. As he got older, he was an umpire, and he umpired a lot of my Little League games, and so, in fact, when I was playing Little League ball, I also was a bat boy some in a Civic League fast pitch league where the Civic clubs had teams. And then long times I was in junior high, they had industrial fast pitch softball league, so they were looking for somebody to keep score, and even though I was, say, 13, 14 years old, people like Crockett Walls, Bob Martin, and Marvin Hall, who umpired in the league, Bob played, and people like Crockett, who was umpiring, they kind of recommended me, and they picked me up, carried me there to keep score. And it's something for a kid that age to be an official scorer, but that was something I just, by reading about scores early on in my life and being around sports, I just took a liking to it, and there it was, and that sort of set the table for my future.
And you did the same for the American Legion Post-19 baseball?
Right, they needed somebody to do that. There I was, 15, 16 years old, and George Miles was the coach then, and he, I guess, saw me around the ballparks. And then Hugh Hayes, who later was co-worker with me at the Daily Herald, was the collegiate commander, and he would ask me to go on trips with the team, like to Clarksville, would play games, be the scorekeeper, and well, I'd hop in the car and go. It was the story of my life there for a number of years, and I've always felt close to American Legion baseball, even though I never played on the team. In fact, way back whenever, one of my teammates in Little League baseball was Pat Quillen, and his dad, Mutt Quillen, was successful. Well, coached the state championship football team at Columbia High School in 1952, and Coach Quillen was the American Legion baseball coach, and he'd have me and Pat over to be bat boys for their games at Montana Ballpark. And so I've always just felt close to post-19 baseball, and that's gone on. That was over 50 years now. I just felt like to be part of American Legion baseball.
So you actually got a chance to start keeping stats for the Daily Herald and Ralph Dawson in this period.
Right, Ralph was the sports editor, and he had a special preference to taking pictures and letting somebody else do the paperwork as far as keeping score or play-by-play football games, whatever. He just had me on the sidelines for Central High football games, and being my connection with CMA, there was times when he would he'd take his Saturdays and be elsewhere and have me CMA play their football games on Saturday, and I'd go do their games and turn in the information to him, and he'd say, well, why don't you just write it up? And that's sort of how I got to writing stories, and also get my ties to the Daily Herald was Ralph Dawson, and of course some of his predecessors like Doug Underwood was aware of me in his days, and Jimmy Parsons also had written some for the Herald, and I lived near him, and my brother Courtney did some of that too. So I had ties to the Herald, so of course, and Ralph was the one that set the table for me.
1959, and your 4-year-old brother Andy then and 2-year-old sister Susan moved to a nice dead-end area over on Mays Place.
Right off of West 6th Street, and you know, that was the first time I felt away from the CMA campus. I was right beside it before they entered on the campus, but then I was right downtown basically, and just a few blocks from Daily Herald, and a whole lot closer to Pillow Park. I was off the campus, but then I didn't need a playground anymore. I needed a real thing, so I was blessed. I was not ever driving. I could still just walk a few blocks, go over the Duck River Bridge, and be right at Pillow Park. And that my home sort of rotated from the CMA campus down to Pillow Park. They had another extended playground or employment for the future too.
So, as an official scorer also for the first ever Babe Ruth Baseball League, another one of your official scorer duties, you also got a chance to start coaching.
Right. Of course, there again, Bob Martin was one of the coaches for Babe Ruth Baseball. Bob Martin, Bobby Harris, A.H. Pogue, and everybody knew me, so they had me there to keep score, and they thought, well, he's been around the ballpark enough, he ought to be able to take his kids that don't make our team, make the teams, and put together a farm team, and there was enough of them to go around. And a gentleman named Bob Hurston, who was a coach at Whitthorne there for a couple of years, they gave him some of the other kids too. And so the next year, when the league expanded to 6 teams, everybody said, well, here's the 5th and 6th place team, and we finished 3rd. And I was kind of frustrated at that. I think we should have been better than that. So
you liked that coaching experience?
Yeah, I enjoyed that coaching experience, and of course, I kept my kids playing while we still had the Babe Ruth game. We'd go down to Mount Pleasant. Red Nichols was famous then for putting together independent baseball teams and buying players to go play against Monsanto and those other semi-pro teams. Well, he also had kids playing, so we go play Red Nichols in between our games there. So we brought these kids along pretty good, and most of them went on to be pretty good high school players too.
Now, what may have been your first real job after high school was working down at the Pillow Park Recreation Department complex. That's you and Coach Spickard kind of ran that place for several years. Yeah.
They didn't have a full-time recreation director as they had now. They had the summertime director. So he had the summer program, and he just kind of brought me along to help put the ball fields together and do some other recreation areas at shuffleboard, rotate courts, keep them up on certain nights. And so he kept me pretty busy. We went over to Fairview Park during the day some and worked with Richard Howell, a good baseball, good working guy, and Billy Morgan, who eventually became recreation director. Actually, I always said that I was very good at keeping the clock for him. I let him know when it's lunchtime, break time. And Willie was good at talking, so we'd talk about sports. And Richard Howell was a great worker. Yeah. So between the three of us, we knew what to talk about, when to eat, when to break, and get the job done. So.
And you started a city basketball league. Yeah,
Coach Spickard knew that I liked basketball, and Bud never was big on basketball. We knew that was something between football and baseball season to go along with it. So we'd started some basketball leagues there to keep people in they built the little youth center there, and so no longer we had to play outdoors. We'd go inside, play in the winter, And of course they had other activities going, but for me basketball was the activity. So of course, and being that I was about 19 years old, we weren't totally used to 19, 20, 21-year-old guys playing, which was a break for me because I got to go out and play with 30 and 35-year-old guys if I didn't play with my own age group. So I decided I better do that. And
another coach from the high school, Joanne Ramsey, started the girls' league.
yeah, she got involved in starting there. We started some basketball leagues and some softball leagues. It was, I guess the softball, some of those started in the early 60s.
So the Daily Herald hires you as a sports editor.
They brought me on for the part-time, and at that point I would, when the funeral homes bring in obituaries, I would type those up, or the Ann Landers things come in, I'd have to type those up, and that was the linotype days. But I didn't know all this time they were just, Ralph Dawson had sort of said, well, he told them that he was going to go into a different line of work, and they're just going to bring me along to be the sports editor come in the school year. And so that's when it all came together in June of 1962 when I turned 21.
And you were still working, of course, with the recreation department you mentioned, and the Amateur Softball Association in a multi-county area. You became the adult director.
What happened on that, in 1962, my first year as sports editor, two men who had worked for TVA came in from Chattanooga and played slow pitch softball, which people in Columbia or the area didn't know about. I didn't know about. They said, look, what do we need to do to get a league started? And I said, well, let's go to Brud Spicker, the recreation department, and see what we can get going. By then, that Brud had become full-time recreation director. So we got together and formed a 10-team league, no lights. We played daytime softball, 4:30 in the afternoon. In 1964, the Daily Herald team, among others, played in the state tournament in Chattanooga. So for about 20 plus years, I tried to develop all our girls programs, our adult programs, threw a boys slow pitch in there, and attended state meetings from across the state. And that gave me a really good chance to meet people that are involved in recreation.
When you first sat behind that desk as the sports editor for the Daily Herald, what were your thoughts? Did you think, this is my lifetime job and what I've always wanted to do? Or was it more like just a flow of events and this happened to be what you were doing at the time? What was it like when you first sat back there and started working?
Well, I thought it was just something that I was blessed to be able to do, because that's the only thing I knew in life. It seemed to be with sports. It just seemed to be the natural. It seemed to be what I needed to be doing. But I wanted to one thing I always wanted to remember, and that was one thing I've always felt about Fred Russell, who was my journalistic idol, was be positive. You know, try not to be critical, just keep things in positive, because kids need to be positive, they need to be confident, and they need to know that sports is something that is to be enjoyed. I've enjoyed it, and it's something that should be that way. It shouldn't be something that should be anything else but enjoyable.
62 was the year roughly when Jim Cartwright comes to Columbia and takes over at Central High School. Talk about the succession of Central High School football coaches as far back as you can remember, and the kinds of the highlights that you remember from all those coaches.
Of course, the first coach I was familiar with was Coach Quillen, because he lived in the neighborhood and they had very successful teams, including the 1952 state championship team, and that's before playoffs, and they were done by teams records and their tradition and their Dr. Lickenhouse rankings. But there was always a little challenge out there for the teams because they had to play the upper crust, which at that time were Oak Ridge, Isaac Litton, High School, and Nashville. Columbia would schedule those, and when they were able to win those games, then they set the tempo for their state championship. Coach Quillen got called to Tennessee Tech to go there and be a part of their schools, so they left town. Bob Weiss became the head coach during my high school years through the school year 58, 59, and needless to say, we weren't as successful as Coach Quillen was, or Jim Cartwright came the year after I graduated, and his first team was actually 1959, and that's where he came in the summer as a young coach, and suddenly decided that he just seemed to have, I guess there was a movement to go from the pillar part where all games had been played previously to go to develop a stadium. I'm sure the county commissioners and primarily Monsanto Chemical Company had that goals in mind, and he just stepped in there and took, and with the help of his players, really went out and built and developed the stadium.
Okay, Jim Cartwright era.
So Jim's was 23 years, and I can remember so countless number of times that we would talk on the phone on maybe a couple times a week at night, well after practice, well after he had players over and they came over maybe once a week some, and they would talk about the way things coming up, and so we'd talk maybe a Monday night after the weekend, then again on about Wednesday night we'd talk in preparation for the week. Of course, be it some practice sessions and all the games, and it's with him. It's where I think I've learned more than any one coach about the extended importance of a sport and how teammates could bond together and go on forever. I don't think there's any other one coach that had more players that became just tight for life, and with him on the sidelines, there were so many memorable moments. Some victory, some defeat, whatever, but some. And one thing people always wondered about with Coach Cartwright would always seem to be on the referees a good bit, and they holler back at him, "Sit down, Jim, go back, Jim," and Jim be on, then behave. What people didn't know was those same guys, 4 or 5 guys, would be sitting over his house an hour after the game, and they would have a big time together. His wife Nancy would have food there for him, and everybody thought they were like rivals, but they were friends. They were just competing during games, and I just really learned that, that while the game was the big thing, and if people wanted to win or lose, it wasn't the victory or defeat. It's the rewards of just being is the participating part of it. And of course, he was born to coach defensive football, and I think now that in all sports, I still think defense first. I don't care if it's a baseball game, basketball, football, soccer, what have you. I still think defense gives you a chance to win, and maybe that's something that I'll always carry with me, that I think I learned through Jim Cartwright. After that, coaching-wise, Bob Yancey coached years, and Bob was an offensive innovator and loved passing. Of course, Coach Cartwright, passing was the last resort. But with Bob Yancey, it was pass first. 20 years, Bob Yancey coached some. Dan Bland coached a couple of years. And then Philip Wright came in and got us Columbia to the playoffs in 1997. The story behind that, Philip was assistant coach for Coach Bland, and he had been a head coach at a few different high schools. And anyway, he came in, took over in '96. And at the end of the '96 year, he says, well, see what he did, he got a young man named Dan Ugle to come out for football. Dan had played baseball and had played football before, and his brother Mike had played, but they were the nicest young men you'll ever meet, but also two of the most aggressive and hardest playing guys you'll ever play against. And Dan, Philip got Dan to come out and play. Dan's now a pro baseball player with Florida Marlins, but Dan played linebacker. And that next spring, Coach Wright said, well, Marion said, you don't believe this, but Dan Ugle's going to be our quarterback. He's never been on offense in his life. He's going to be our quarterback going into senior year, and we're going to run triple option. And we're going to turn some heads around. Wait and see. Well, they did. Got to the state playoffs. Well, Dan's first play of the year was a 75-yard touchdown pass in Dixon County. Never threw another touchdown pass that year, but he and the two halfbacks all gained over 1,000 yards rushing. But that kind of put Columbia back on the football map a little bit. And in '99, actually, Philip asked me when he first came, he said, I need to bring in somebody to help me run the offense. I'm a defensive coach. So I need an offensive coordinator. Do you know anybody out there? And I said, well, I know who's out of a job now who knows offense, because he's running the offense at Shovel. That's Vance Ballou, and he's a hometown boy. So let's see if we can get him back. They're going to bring Whit Taylor in to coach at Shovel. So let's get Vance, so that was easy to do. And Vance had a whole lot helping Dan Ugle at quarterback and helping get the offensive schemes go along with that. Of course, now Vance is the head coach, and we went with Vance playoffs pretty regularly until the last 4 years when we got stuck in the close by Williamson County district, and Williamson County always had to win a team in state finals. It was hard to get through there, but.
We're going to be back with Marion Wilhoite right after this.
I came to find out, after getting the opportunity to work with him more, covering the Titans in high school games and everything from girls volleyball to the Titans. He has this incredible memory, and we'd often be out there covering a Little League game, and he'd tell me stories, of the kid out on the field's grandfather that, a game that he played in, 20 or 30 years before.
Welcome back. Marion Wilhoite, sports writer for the Columbia Daily Herald for